It's been 6 years now since my husband and I achieved that goal of debt freedom. Was it a journey? Absolutely. Did we learn a lot along the way? Absolutely. It's like that saying, experience is the best teacher, and for us it definitely was a big teacher. I learned a lot when I was in debt, and I learned a lot on that debt-free journey. And in today's video I'm going to be unpacking some of that, and I'm going to be sharing with you 9 important lessons that debt taught me. I'm sharing these lessons in the hope that it will inspire you on your own debt-free journey, and it will also inspire you to know that just because you're in debt now doesn't mean you're always going to be in debt, and it doesn't mean there isn't a way out. There's always a way out, and you can always change your financial situation if you're willing to put in the work required to achieve that goal. Hindsight, I guess they say, is 20/20, but when I look back on my debt situation, one lesson that stands out to me that I learned is all that glitters is not gold. I know when I was drowning in debt, from the outside looking in, you would never know how bad my financial situation was. You would never know how much money I owed, and you would never know and understand how many sleepless nights I had to endure worrying about the debt that was hanging over my head. I was still very much outside. I was living my best life. I was enjoying, I was going everywhere, and I was still keeping up appearances. When you're crippled by debt and you feel like there's no way out when it comes to your personal finances, it seems like everybody else around you has it together and everyone else seems to be doing well and thriving financially, when that often isn't the case. You don't really know what's going on behind closed doors. All you know is what people tell you or what they want you to see. We're not flies on the walls in people's homes, and we don't know what the reality of people's financial situations are. That taught me a valuable lesson to face my front and not believe the hype, because if I myself was in that position where I was keeping up appearances, I'm sure I wasn't the first person to be in so much debt, and I'm definitely not going to be the last. Another important lesson that debt taught me is that nobody is coming to save you. Like when I was in debt and I was struggling financially, there was nobody coming to bail us out of our financial situation. We had to take responsibility for our own financial situation. We had to take responsibility for clearing up the mess that we got ourselves into. So if you're currently in a position where you're spending money that's not your own and you're keeping up appearances, or you're just that person that doesn't want to face their financial situation and take responsibility and accountability for the mess that you've probably found yourself in, then the reality is, like my mum always says, you make your bed, you have to lay in it. So yes, that sounds like tough love, but sometimes tough love is what we need in order to take action. Yes, I understand right now it's a really bad economic time, but are we going to continue to complain about what's beyond our control, or are we going to look more inwardly at the things that we can take financial responsibility for? As much as I buried my head in the sand, that debt was there waiting for me every single time I lifted my head. So if you're that person right now that's burying your head in the sand, you're not opening those red letters, you're ignoring the bailiffs when they turn up at your door, that situation isn't going to get better. It's not going to change unless you do something about it. Unfortunately, burying our heads in the sand, ignoring our financial situation and not taking responsibility for it isn't going to change things. It's not going to make things any better. If anything, it's going to exacerbate the situation and make things a lot worse. That debt, unfortunately, isn't going nowhere. It's always going to be there waiting for you. So it's best to tackle it head on and see what you can do about starting to tackle that debt. Another valuable lesson that debt taught me is it's so much easier to get into debt than it is to get out of debt. When I was in debt and I was swiping that credit card left and right and I was buying things on credit and I wasn't thinking about the price point of any of those items, at that time it was just so easy for me to spend money. But when I was spending that money, there was no consideration or really thought given to the fact that that money needed to be paid back at some point. And that is the thing about debt. It's so enticing, it's so inviting, and it's so easy to come across that when you spend that money, you don't feel any way about it. You don't feel bad. You don't even consider the prices as much as you do when you're using credit, because it's somebody else's money. But although it's somebody else's money, it's you that's going to have to pay that money back. And that was a big lesson that I sadly had to learn the hard way. When I think about all the things that I bought on credit at that time, where are those things now? What do I have to show for it? Absolutely nothing. I mean, to be fair, the only thing that I can say I still have to show for it is the carpet that I bought on credit at that time. I remember spending over £3,000 at that time on my carpet. It was a really nice carpet, the one that you sink your feet into, that luxurious feeling carpet. That luxury carpet that I spent £3,000 on once upon a time is now very old and not so luxurious luxurious anymore. But that debt is something I still had to pay back, even when it was no longer feeling so luxurious. So definitely when it comes to debt, I learned that the hard way, that it is so easy to get in debt and it is so much harder to get out of debt. Another important lesson that debt taught me is that I need to stop being so impulsive. Like literally, when I think back to that time when I was in a lot of that debt could have been avoided if I just took a second to consider the purchase that I was about to make. But because at that time, like I said, that credit was so easy to come by, I was just swiping left, swiping right without even giving any purchase a second thought. Sometimes I bought things that I didn't even need, clothes that I bought at the time that still had the tags in them months and even years later, items that I ended up giving to charity shop or sending to Nigeria, clothes that I just brought on impulse at the time that I thought I'd get round to wearing and I never did. And that is the thing when it comes to credit, because it's not your money, it's not your hard-earned cash, you just spend it without giving it a second thought. And I was just so impulsive at that time when I was in debt, and that's something that I had to learn the hard way. Now fast forward to today where I am no longer in debt, I am not as impulsive as I once was. If I can't afford to buy it with my own card at least twice, I'm not buying that item. No more will I just buy things on credit and think about the cost later. No, now purchases are considered, are calculated. And now 9 out of 10 times I just don't make that impulse purchase. Delayed gratification is something that debt has taught me to learn how to apply. Like literally, once upon a time, I would just buy what I wanted to buy when I wanted to buy it. Now I practice delayed gratification. Now I'm happy to just wait and save up for a purchase rather than just buying what I want to buy when I want to buy it. I think also having the children has helped me to be better when it comes to practicing delayed gratification, because I need to show my kids a better example. I don't want them to be impulsive when it comes to them spending money. So if they see me being impulsive with my money, they're going to internalize that and start adopting that same attitude to money as they grow. So I'm very conscious of that when it comes to my spending habits and spending behaviors, because children learn a lot more from what they observe than from what we tell them. Another important lesson that debt taught me was the importance of choosing the right spouse. When my husband and I made that decision to tackle our debt head on, it was a decision that we made together as a united front. And if I look back and think about my experience at that time, if I wasn't married to my husband and I had a husband who wasn't financially responsible or wasn't on the same page as me wanting to get our finances in order, it would have taken a lot longer to pay off that debt, and it would have been an even more stressful and an even more strenuous experience and season of our lives. But because we both came to that realization at the same time that we needed to tackle our finances head on, we were able to work together as a team to pay down that debt, and that way both of us were working together towards that same shared goal, as opposed to one of us wanting to pay down that debt and the other one not wanting to pay off the debt. I think that was really important in the process, and it was a big lesson that I learned. And I guess I learned that lesson in hindsight, but that was just lucky that my husband and I happened to be on the same page, because in hindsight, if I was married to somebody that didn't want to tackle the debt, I can't imagine what would have happened in that situation and where we would be today. We probably would still be in debt, because it would be like, I'm trying to do something and you're just there coming behind me and undoing what I'm trying to do. Even when I think back to the time when we were in debt, if I'm honest, I was more of the problem than my husband was, because I was the one that was less financially responsible in terms of being the impulsive spender, whereas he was more shrewd when it came to the finances and didn't like to spend any money at all, to be fair. So yeah, at that time we were two opposites, but we were able to come together for that unified goal. And I think it is so important when it comes to relationships to be on the same page when it comes to personal finances, because once you're together, you're a union, you're a team, the decision that one person makes is going to have an impact on the other person and vice versa. So it is important to work together towards common financial goals, and I think that's an important lesson that I learned on my own financial journey. Another important lesson that debt taught me was the importance of time when it comes to financial planning. And the reason why this is so important is because when it comes to interest, you're paying a lot more interest the longer you're in debt. I didn't realise this until I was on my debt-free journey, but the amount of interest you pay compounds against you when you're in debt versus compound interest working in your favour when you're saving money. So when I was in debt and on my debt-free journey, I wish I learned that lesson earlier and tackled that debt sooner, because it would have saved me a lot of money in terms of interest payments and the amount of money I ended up paying back to my different creditors. The longer that you're in debt and the longer it takes you to pay down debt, the more interest that you're going to pay over a longer period of time. And also, still on the topic of financial planning, the impact that debt has on your credit score is something, again, I hadn't considered, and it was a lesson I had to learn the hard way. Thankfully, when it comes to my personal debt situation, I already had a property, so I wasn't trying to get on the property ladder at that time. I was paying down the debt. But if it had happened that way and I was trying to buy a property, I would have been unable to do so at that time when I was in so much consumer debt, because my credit score would have been really low and that would have impacted my borrowing potential. Another important lesson that I learned when I was in debt was how much of a stronghold consumerism had me in. If you're not familiar with consumerism, consumerism is the idea that increasing the consumption of goods and services purchased in the market is always a desirable goal, and that a person's well-being and happiness depends fundamentally on obtaining consumer goods and material possessions. When I was in a lot of debt, it really made me think about consumerism and how impacted I was by this consumerist culture. Because if I'm honest with you, Instagram had me feeling like I needed to buy everything every time, especially when it came to seasons like Christmas, birthdays, that pressure to always be perfect, that pressure to buy everything, have the latest drip, making sure my kids always looked on point. All of those influences from social media did have an impact on my spending decisions and the way I allocated my funds. Because if I'm honest with you, social media made me feel like I had to have it all. And even when I had it all, I still felt like I needed more. Whereas now, fast forward to becoming debt free, I've learned too much. I've been through too much and I've seen too much for me to be consumed by what other people are doing with their lives, and for me to be influenced by what other people are doing in their lives. Because I know when I was in that debt, nobody was coming to save me. Nobody was helping me to pay down that debt. So now I find peace and contentment in so little, and I'm happy and I'm okay with that. Another important lesson that debt taught me is that I am capable of a lot more than I think. When I was in all that debt and I didn't see light at the end of the tunnel, I thought I was never going to be able to pay it off, and I thought I was never going to be able to transform my financial position. But fast forward all these years later, I have been able to become debt free and I am in a better financial position. I mean, right now I'm currently on statutory maternity pay and I'm able to survive, more than survive. In fact, I'm doing okay, I'm doing well, and my family's doing well too. On paper, we should be struggling financially, but I think because now I'm in a position where I find contentment in very little, I'm okay with not having all the glitz and glamour in the world. I think I find contentment and joy in such little things, that I find happiness in non-material possessions now, which enables me to live a very simplistic life, and I'm happy and I'm okay with that. Going back to the personal growth that I experienced from being in debt, I think me just understanding that I'm capable of so much more than I think has given me that inner confidence and inner strength to just standing firm in my beliefs and my decisions when it comes to my finances. Once upon a time, peer pressure was something I would succumb to when it comes to financial decisions, whereas now my friends know me. There's certain things that I'm not prepared to spend money on, and I'm okay with saying no, that's not in my budget, or no, I don't want to spend my money in that way. Overcoming debt has enabled me to learn that lesson, and it's something that I really do value and really do treasure now. A final lesson that debt has taught me, which I'm so happy I've been able to learn, granted it had to be the hard way, but there you go, such is life. I'm so happy that debt taught me about financial stability, and now that I'm financially stable, I'm not prepared to do anything that's going to compromise my financial stability. Things come and go, but your peace of mind, listen, that's a price I'm not willing to pay to compromise at any cost. So those are 9 important lessons that debt taught me. Let me know in the comment section below what you think of those lessons, if you can relate to any of them, if you're currently in debt or have recently become debt free, and let me know in the comment section below what your experience with debt has been so far. If you made it this far in the video and you haven't yet given it a thumbs up, then do me a favour and give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you're not yet subscribed. Share this video with a friend or family member. So if you want more financial education content or more money motivation, definitely click here and watch this playlist.